So we're here on Daf Lamed Tes, and we're up to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer. And on the fourth line from the top of the Amud, the Gemara quotes the Mishnah of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in the case of Chartzanim Zag, and he's not chayiv unless he eats two Chartzanim and one Zag, like two pits that are covered by a klipa. The Chartzanim are called the Chitzonim, and the Zogim are the Pnimim. That's according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. However, that's according to Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yossi, it's just the opposite. And he says that the Zug, which is called the Chartzanim, that's going to be the outside, meaning that's the klipa, right? And it makes sense that you can have the Pnimi is called the, the inner one is called not the Zug, but rather the Chartzanim. So if you have two, according to Rabbi Yossi, so let's just see once more. According to Rabbi Yossi, in the case of two Chartzanim and a Zag, it means that the Zag, one second. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, everything makes sense according to Rabbi Yehuda because he says the Zag is the Pnimi. Right? So then, one second. Yeah, if the Zag is the Pnimi, then you have let's say two Chartzanim and a Zag. I want to go over this one more time just to make sure I have it straight. The Chartzanim are the Chitzonim and the Zagim are the Pnimim. The Zagim are the Pnimim. And according to Rabbi Yossi, it's the Zug, or the Zag, I should guess to say, would be the Chitzon. The Zug is the Chitzon. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. So now I got it straight. Yeah, Rabbi Yossi was the one who makes more sense. Why? Because if you have, let's say, you have one chitzon and two pnimi, right? One chitzon, which is the outer peel, and two pnimi, which is the which according to the Shita of Yossi is going to be the zug, or what we call the zag. So if the Zag, if you're going to have what? Let's see if we can see Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef Kiman Mitagaminon, and this is a pasuk in Parshas Noso. It says Michatzanim v'ad Zag, Mipurtzanin v'ad Itzurin. And that's going to be the Shita of Rav Yosef. So what is Purtzanin and what is Itzurin? So we're saying now that the Chartzanim are the Pnimim. So it makes sense that you have one chitzoni with two pnimim, because the cover over the grape is going to cover two pits on the inside. So if the chartzanim are the pnimim, we understand why the chartzanim are two, and if the zag is the chitzoni, then we understand why there's only one, because one chitzoni has inside of it two of these pits. And the Targum here reflects the sheet of Rabbi Yossi, because Chartzanim is translated by the Targum as Purtsanin, and Purtsanim means Garinim, whereas the Targum of Zagin is Itzurin, and those are the Klipos Hachitzonos. So when we say that you're not chayiv until you eat 2 Chartzanim and 1 Zag, so if the Chartzanim are the Pnimim, it means that you ate 1 Klipa and 2 Garinim. All right, now we'll start the Mishnah here on Daf Lamed Tes. Now, the beginning of this Mishnah is going to clarify the din of a Nazir who violated his Nazirus and he cut his hair during Yemei HaNazirus. And the Mishnah starts by telling us that Stam Nazir Shloshim Yom. So the minimum amount of Nazirus is 30 days. So he would have to wait until after 30 days of Nazirus until he undergoes Giluach Sa'aro. But what happened instead? Gilach, the Nazir decided for whatever reason to cut his hair during those 30 days. O Gilchu list him, or he was taken captive by a group of hoodlums and they did a Giluach job on him. And the Mishnah establishes Soser. He loses Shloshim Yom. He loses the entire Malos of Shloshim Yom because he did not maintain his hair uncut. And therefore he's got to start from the beginning a new period of Shloshim Yom. So what is he going to do? He can only complete his Nazirus after 30 days. And at the end of the 30 days, as part of the Siyum HaNazirus, he has a chiyuv, a mitzvah of Tiglach Asaro. Now, what's going to happen is that at the end of his Nazirus, he has hair that grew for 30 days. And that's a Tanai in the mitzvah of Tiglachas, that when you complete your Nazirus, you must have hair that grew for 30 days. But here he cut his hair off, or somebody chopped it, with a tomahawk, chopped his hair off in the middle of the 30 days. He's going to now have to start a new 30 days to achieve 30 days of Gidul Seyar. Now the Mishnah continues to describe how he violated this Isur, this prohibition of Giluach Saro. And there are a number of possible ways. Number one, Nazir Shegilach Bein Bezug. So a Zug is a pair of scissors. Bein Betar, and a tar is a razor. Or perhaps Shesifseif. Sifseif means he ripped out his hair. And in all these cases, whether he uses misparayim or sakin or with his hands, kolshu, even if he only takes out one single hair, he's chayav. One single hair. And chayav means he gets malchus, and he violated the lotas evtar lo yavar al rosho. And later on, we're going to learn in a brisa from whence do we derive that he can violate this lav even by pulling out the hair with his hands, or by cutting the hair with his scissors, and not only with a tar. After all, the Torah only says tar. Are you there, Ben? I don't. I didn't hear you. Ibailahu. The Gemara offers a suffix. Hi Mazia. Mazia is the Aramaic for Seir. Militachas Ravi o Miliel. How does it grow? Does it grow from the bottom and the root, or Miliel? It grows from the top of the Seir. Now, I'm not sure what this means, but according to the first side, which is called Milatachas Ravi, the Gedela starts with the chibur of the seir into the body. I guess you call it the root. That's where the Sarah comes out of his body. And that's the part that grows and pushes the seir further and further away from his head. According to the second side, the part of the seir that's rooted in his head remains where it is. It doesn't move. But rather, the seir itself at the extension extends longer and longer. But the part that's mechuber leguf remains in its place. So the Gemara asks, L'may nafka. Why are we going into these biological questions about how hair grows? And the Gemara answers, L'gabi Nazir shegilchu listim. If he was taken over by these bandits and they chopped off his hair against his will, and they only chopped off part of his hair. They left that part of the hair that's still growing in the shorish, in the root, and shayrubo kidei lachuf rosho leikro. Right? When you want to know the minimum shear of the length of a seir in halacha, what you do is you see if you can fold over the seir in which the head, the extension part, reaches the root. So I don't know exactly how much that is. Maybe it's a few centimeters. I don't know. So now we'll see why the nafkamina is. If you're going to tell me that the seir grows from the root, then Nazirus in the se'aros that he took upon himself to grow when he took upon himself Nazirus, Hashakle, the Listim took it away from him. Why? So the Masechet here adds the following. And you can look into your translation. He says, Shareya Se'ar Shahaya Olav Kodem Lachen Nisrachek Min Aguf V'tzomach Acher Tachtov. So that the original seir that grew, or shall we say, that was there when he took Nazirus and then subsequently grew, that part was cut off. The Kevin Shegilcha listim as Roshei Seirosov. I'm looking for a good English translation of Roshei Seirosov. It's the head of the hair, meaning the extension of the hair, but there's got to be a better word. See if you could read that in the English. Nimtza shenotlu bimenu esaros sav shahayu ola be'es kabolas nazirus.
Yeah, I'm looking for a translation, sorry.
I'm just going to try to just get the flow of the Gemara, even though I'm missing that one translation, but the concept, Ela Iyamit Mile El Ravi, that the seir grows from the top and it gets longer and longer, but the part that was attached to his goof remains in its place, Maidi Aktish HaKoyim. So the bottom part of the seir that's connected to his head, which was there at the time of this Makabal Nazirus, and the Chalos Kiddush Nazirus was Chal on that part of the hair, it's still Kaya. In other words, the hairs on his head, again, assuming they have the shear of Kedei Lochav Roshal Ikro, are the same hairs that he had at the time that he accepted his Nazirus, and he could fulfill his mitzvah of growing hair for 30 days, even though they've cut off the ends of his hair. So there's no stira to his Nazirus. So according to this opinion, which is called Miliel, we would only require a stiras nazirus in a case where they cut it down to the shoresh, mamish down to the shoresh.
So in terms of the translation, it says like either growing from the root or growing from the top,
Okay,
or the end of the hair.
I was hoping for a more sophisticated word, because when you say
Yeah,
top,
unfortunately, it doesn't say.
Top, you envision something vertical that starts down here and goes up here, and that's the top. In the case of saros, it doesn't stand vertically. I mean, there are people who have, hair that stand, but usually hair is flat down. So the word top is
Right.
a little bit,
It
less
grows
than
from
a
the
perfect
end.
translation. So again, the shoresh he calls makom mechuber leguf. And then when he talks about the extended part of the hair, so he calls it ktsei hasaros, the end of the hairs. Oh, that's not. You know what? I think the end of the hair maybe is even better than the top of the hair. I don't know. Whatever you like. Toshma. So we're going to try to answer this question, and that the part that grows is the what do we call it? The end of the hair, right? The end of the hair, or as you call it, the top of the hair. That's the top that's growing. That's the part that's growing. But the shorish remains the same. Meha in bachaya. There's a kina, which I guess you'd call a flea or
a louse, it says here.
Louse. And that's alive. And he finds it in, I guess, the end of his hair. The koyim, the ikfa de binsa. And I guess this kina is always at the end of the hair. Just 1 second. The end of the hair. Well, I'm trying to figure this out. It's what the end of the hair.
It's found in the root of the hair.
Here it says the roots. So
Time to equal the vinta. It's found in the root of the hair. Always found the root in the hair.
Just 1 second. All right, so let's see. Isal kedaitach miletachas ravi. If you're going to say that the seir grows from the root, then, right? That's what we said, miletachas means the root, correct? Just 1 second. Yeah, misad shorsho.
Yes.
Is then bereshe de binse boile mekem. He says, Afin betchila yoshva betachtis haseor, heriach zman godel haseor, v'nisrachik min haguf, v'oisa akina ola imo, v'oisa nisheres lamata somach leguf. Mikevet shi mitzuya lamata muchach shechelek haseor hasamach leguf nishar b'mkomo. So that part that's near the root, attached to the head, remains stationary in its place, and therefore this kina, it never leaves from that spot, right? Because it's not like the ground underneath its legs, so to speak, is moving, because that ground, which is samach l'rosh, it's near the head, always remains stable. So why is it that this in Bachaya is be'ikva de binsa. The Gemara rejects it. Liola militachas ravi. I can't prove that it is, what's it called? That it is mila'el, because maybe it's still milatachas. Agav chiyusa v'agav chiyusa noches v'azul inba. I guess the kina somehow is, it has this life force, like chiyusa is a life force, and it moves together, with the hair. As the hair grows, it goes with it. So you can't prove here that the seir grows milamala from, as you call it, the top or the end. It could be that it grows from the root, but nevertheless, this chaya moves with the hair. As the hair grows, it moves out.
Yeah, in this section, it seems to be that it's talking about if you would say that it grows from the bottom, the hair, the louse should be at the end of the hair.
The root. Bottom means the root.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it should be at the end of the hair because will get pushed up by the hair's growth. But then the Gemara rejects it, saying that because the because the hair grows in the bottom, the louse just because it's alive, just continually keeps going down against the hair because it wants to stay by the scalp, which is where its food is. So it rejects that claim that that we would say, oh well, the louse should be at the end if it grew from the bottom because it would get pushed up by the hair, and saying no, that that the louse could just descend.
Hashma inba mesa beresha de binsa. So this kina dies when it's at the Rosh HaSeir, which is the end of the Seir. If you're going to tell me that the hair moves out and grows and grows and grows, is then be'ikva de binse boile meken. The kina should be standing at the tachtis of the seir. In other words, it should be back at the root. Why? Because there, when it was, alive and well, that's where it was, as we said earlier. Now, there it died because it can't climb up to the head of the saros. This sounds like what you said before, the top. So we see from here that the seir is gadol milamata, and the kina is going with it as the hair grows until it gets all the way to the end of the seir. And the Gemara rejects this hasam nami. Here too, we could reject it for the same reason, that maybe even though the seir is growing from the top part of the hair, nevertheless, when it dies, it goes to the scalp, I guess you'd say, and it doesn't remain down there. Mishum de lesbe chela. It doesn't have that koach because it's dying or it died. And sarugi sariga viazil. That part of the hair that's closest to the head is now like moving away from the kina. It's like, like a rug from underneath the floor where you're stepping. When you pull out the rug, shutoli klape mata, me'achar she'eni yachol litofes b'shoresh haseir. The Ein Raya, there's no proof Shaser Gadol Milamata. Toshma Mibloris the Kushiyim. It seems that there's like a ponytail that is grown by the black people. Do you have the translation like a ponytail, bluris?
It just says long hair. It doesn't say.
Shedarkom legalech es kol se'ar rosh, u'menichem rak se'ar muot, v'kolim oso lechol orko, achu kosher mahudok etzel shorsho v'smichas larosh. Like they cut off the hair, and they leave like enough hair to tie it down to the, to the scalp. The basa de megadlin law, rafye militachas. So I guess they were able to take those parts and sort of braid them together. And the connection back to the head becomes weak. So what do we see from this? That the reason why the kesher that's near the head gets weak is because there's new hair that's growing, and that new hair is not braided. But if you would say that the seir is gadol milamala b'kotzeu, then lo haya misrofev hahiduk b'samach l'rosh, that part that's connected to the head would not become weakened, and the Gemara rejects it. Chasam nami, there too, in the case of, I guess, bluris hakushim, we could say that in truth, the seir is gadol milamala. It gets weaker in that part of the hair that is rooted in the samach l'rosh, close to the head. Aidi de kamta hi mishichva rafia. It seems that this process of braiding miskametes, it's like gets all bent out of shape, I guess you'd say, when he sleeps on his head, when he puts his head back, and his head puts pressure on the braided hairs, and then misrofei fakeshem mimokom hahiduk samach l'rosh, that part which is close to the head becomes very weak. But there's no proof from here that the saros are gedolos milamata. Toshma misekrita. Sikrita is a red dye, and they color the hairs of animals, and this color causes the hairs to stick together as one body. The Rafi Amra. And after a certain amount of time, the wool gets a little bit weak. Milatachas, which means milamata, the place where it connects to the scalp. So the reason for this is because the hairs growing out of that mokom chibra laguf are replaced now by new hairs. Visanya, we learned in a brisa that this activity of dyeing the hair of animals, which is recorded in the Gemara and Bechoros, Daf Nun Chesam and Beis, with regard to Ma'aser Behema, that we are mavir the behemoths one by one through a very narrow opening, and every 10th animal we paint with a red paint called sikra, and we sanctify for Ma'aser Behema. Visu, and furthermore, kad sove savaya diknon. when older people will dye their hair and they want to make it black instead of white, and to look young, is chivarin. With the passage of time, they again get white, even though he painted them black.